You're watching City Channel 4, your window to our community.
Today we're going to be talking about creating a legacy document, or just capturing someone's story. You know, legacy document has kind of a heavy, big connotation, but really just talking about capturing our loved ones' wisdom and life experience and stories in some way. Just want to mention a few things. I will go through the presentation, and you've got a copy of the PowerPoint in front of you with some notes pages there if you want to take notes as we go through. And then underneath that is a little takeaway. This is some material that I share with my volunteers to help guide them and to trigger questions when you want to, start that legacy interview with someone in your life. So feel free to ask questions. However, please wait for the microphone to come to you so we can get hear your questions for the Channel 4 audience, because everybody wants to hear what you have to say or feedback. So my name is Sarah Neary, and I am the Volunteer Program Coordinator at Iowa City Hospice. I started out as a social worker there back in '09, and kind of evolved into the Volunteer Program Coordinator. And that involves not only recruiting volunteers and training them in terms of preparing them for sitting with hospice patients and families, but also coming up with and creating and training volunteers for interesting, supportive projects that they can do with patients and families. And so we started this legacy project, and I call it 1.0. That's I'm trying to be cute by saying, this is our first little version. It's a work in progress. But one of the things, just if you spend time with, and particularly in our situation and in my situation with the elderly of our community, you just come to realize that there's a lot of wisdom and life experience there that is well worth capturing and documenting, not only for yourself, but for generations to come. And so this is the legacy project training that I usually give to our volunteers. So as you go through some of this material, and especially in that little question packet, you'll notice that the language refers more to when you're working with a patient or when you first meet the family. Just insert, your own situation there, whether you're doing a legacy project for someone, for your spouse or a family member or a friend. So. But I think you'll find that those questions and some of the comments in that little prep worksheet there is very helpful in setting the tone for a successful legacy interview. Also, just want to thank you for participating in this caregiver education series. Iowa City Hospice recognizes that there are a lot of community caregivers out there who are providing hours and hours of service to their family members, their neighbors, their loved ones. And we want to provide some avenue of support for you all. And so we do that here through this live caregiver presentation. And we also have an online resource called seriousillness.org. And that's a place where you can go and find all sorts of information on a variety of topics and a variety of diseases that you might be dealing with in terms of family caregiving, whether it's dementia, heart disease, cancer, pulmonary issues, those kinds of things. So there's just a wealth of information, not only for community members, but for professionals as well. So it's the type of place where you can go and download stuff and take it to your doctor's office and encourage them to look on there, because we're all educating each other and helping each other in terms of this. It takes a village, community caregiving. I mean, we're caring for each other. So let me just start a little bit with this particular picture. That is the older woman there, the older blonde there is, her name is Rosie Braverman. And she was my partner's grandmother, and I lived with her. I cared for her from the age of 95 until she died at 100. And that the young lady with her is one of the daytime caregivers. So I was working at hospice at the time that I was living with Rosalie, but really not understanding, you know, all the things that went into being a family caregiver. And Rosalie was fairly healthy, but she did have some dementia. So I feel like I experienced some of the challenges and frustrations that can go along with caring for someone with dementia, especially on that 24-hour clock when people with dementia can start to get their days and nights mixed up or can be confused or agitated. There's a risk for falls. It gets more difficult. So, but she was an immigrant from Poland, and she had a lot of stories to tell. And so, you know, part of that experience really taught me how important it is to capture these stories, which we did, and she did in when she was younger too, because the wisdom of her life was kind of endangered. I saw her as living history, and I felt like what she experienced and just the grit and determination and humor and faith that got her through the hard times that she lived through were just such you know, gems of wisdom that we can use in this generation and generations to come. So that's you know, where a lot of my inspiration for not only caregiving and caregivers. I've got a very warm place in my heart for community or family caregivers, but for hospice work and for the Legacy Project. Let's see here. Oops. So, first slide here. The quote at the top, "We do not learn by experience, we learn by reflecting on our experience." So again, for people who are maybe struggling with a serious illness or even a terminal illness, they're looking back and they are, you know, in this process of sifting through some of their life experiences, the choices that they've made, the challenges that they faced. So it's creating this document is not just something that can educate future generations. It's also a way for our loved ones and family members to really sow and gather meaning from their own life experiences. So I like that quote. You know, we go through life and we have experiences, but it's always those times of taking those moments to look back and reflect and piece those things together that help us find meaning. So for us, the goals of a legacy project are to create an event or occasion to mark, share, and celebrate life events. And so, you know, whether that occasion is the interview or whether that occasion is a special day in the family, or, you know, photographs of a special time, for hospice patients especially, and also for people with a serious illness, they've had a lot of abilities stripped from them. And so creating an occasion where we get to celebrate the things that they contributed to our lives and to the community, very important to create kind of an event around that. So a lot of some of the instructions I have in that Everybody Has a Story to Tell worksheet there is about, you know, setting the tone for the interview or the event too, because it really adds a depth to it if it can have some kind of structure. And the way that we have divided it up for hospice volunteers is there's sort of 3 options on the menu. So the first option would be that oral history, including an interview which can be recorded and then transcribed or just simply recorded. Or it can be not recorded and notes taken, and you know, we live in a very literary community, so you know, it's lots of times some of our volunteers like to take that information and craft along with the patient and the family kind of a narrative. But just that gathering around, telling the story, listening, recording, talking over again, maybe even editing a few things. This is somebody's chance to say, no, it wasn't like that. It was really like that, which has its own value too. The other option that we offer to our patients is a photograph. We have a few very highly trained but volunteer photographers who do lovely, very high quality family and individual portraits that, capture something of the person. And when I think of that, I think of, maybe, picture is worth 1,000 words. So maybe we want to skip the narrative, but if we have a very close-up portrait with, everybody's wrinkles and smile lines and worry lines, clearly in focus, that tells a story too. It's also a way to really emphasize to the person we're photographing, we love you as you are now. We want to remember you as you are now, not just back when you were young and skinny and whatever else. That we value all the things that life has written on your face, and we want to capture that. The other thing is to, connect that up with a special time or event, such as an anniversary, a birthday, or rite of passage. That picture of Rosalie at the beginning was her 100th birthday. And then the third kind of menu option that we offer is some sort of scrapbook or digital scrapbook, some kind of gathering of items that are already around, whether that's photos or scraps of paper with somebody's marriage proposal written on it, or old receipts, or anything that but gathering of found materials, things that already exist. And ideally, the event that's created around that kind of a document is, letting the patient or the loved one that we're talking about, tell the family the stories, and kind of engaging in a question and answer as you choose maybe which special pictures you want to have in this scrapbook and why that one is so special, and describing maybe the story to the children or grandchildren that don't necessarily know the stories. So, this is a very creative, kind of open-ended endeavor, but in terms of training volunteers to work with Iowa City Hospice patients, we've had to sort of give it some structure. But I'm thinking that maybe that's helpful for families and friends too, just to create some limits and some structure to the project. Again, another story or another quote that I like. And again, the recorded account becomes a treasured family heirloom and allows future generations to learn and get to know, in a way, the person that we're celebrating. The reason that we chose legacy for our project is because the sort of double meaning there. If we're creating a legacy, if I'm creating a legacy project or legacy document, it's a reflection of my values. We talk about a will. Our will and testament is an inventory of our valuables, but it's equally, if not more important, for us to leave behind some measure of our values. And so that's my legacy, the things that I stood for, the things that are reflected in this story or book or collection of photographs. But the legacy is also a gift that's handed down. It's a bequest. And so I like that double meaning, because it does have value for the person about which, the central character of the legacy document, it has value for, as well as those who will be reading it. And so the goal is to create a tangible document. It's not just, telling the stories and, just having the gathering and telling the stories and dispersing and saying, well, I'll see you next Thanksgiving. So you want to either record them or videotape them, write them down. or you want a photograph, a special print of the photo, and then, some way of compiling the existing family photos. And there's all sorts of ways to do that nowadays that are a little bit more high-tech than I'm comfortable sharing with you, but I always say, just ask your grandchildren and they can help you. But one of the one of the things that we've that's really been good for us in terms of starting this program is that motto of keeping it really simple. So I'm going to show you some examples of what we've done, and boy, they're nothing fancy. But did that detract at all from the meaning or the value of the experience for everyone involved? No, didn't. But I always say, nowadays everybody's got a phone that's got a camera on it and a video, probably a video or a voice recorder on it. So, if you're sitting around the table and Johnny is texting his friends, put them to use and tell them, hey, turn that video on and record Grandpa because he's saying something really important. So especially for us in hospice care, but it may also be true for people with serious illness, that timing is everything, that, that there's a certain amount of effort involved in creating a legacy document and collaborating with the person. And so if you're talking about someone who has congestive heart failure and is not having a great day, they're not going to be able to talk for a whole long time. Their breath is going to be short. Or a cancer patient who just had a round of chemo yesterday, not going to be feeling too up to it. So that's why it is important to kind of, go into the project with the intention of creating the document, scheduling it in, and especially when the person is, not only physically but cognitively aware enough to share their stories and experiences. I think of their stories and wisdom as endangered, and of course that's more for hospice patients who, whether or not, regardless of what reality reveals, Medicare has required that we put a 6-month trajectory on their illness. And so, when we're working with a hospice patient, we know we have 6 months to work with that person. They may graduate by the end of that time. But we want to capture their stories while they're still feeling well enough to do that, and to gain something from the experience as well. The narrative then takes on kind of an epic meaning. It's so important to engage, I think, everybody in life review. We all do it at various stages of our lives. I just had my 50th birthday, and I did a lot of life review on my 50th birthday. With me, myself, and I, but still, there are milestone times in your life where you look back and you think, these are the choices I've made. Did that make sense? As you're, looking at those footprints. But just to highlight, at a time of life when someone's physical, capacity has been reduced, they feel out of control. They're relying on others for their care and for help, which may be, an undignified thing for some people of some generations. It's tough to ask for help. It's tough to have your, physical needs, your bodily needs have to be taken care of by somebody else. And I think this life review, and it's not just me thinking it, there's a lot of research that shows, is a very valuable exercise in terms of restoring a sense of dignity, a sense of meaning, and even a sense of hope. With a terminal diagnosis. An ethical will, that's a kind of another big complicated phrase that's used to talk about this kind of document. Instead of passing along your valuables, you're passing along your values. That would be a very similar, that would be a statement or a found letter or something that might reflect somebody's values. Dignity therapy is something that's being studied with terminally ill patients. And I include that here because there's a lot of research on this kind of, but it's basically a legacy interview that's being studied. And we'll go into some of the research that just shows that it's a very comforting thing to know that you're leaving something of value behind, something of yourself, something of your heart. In big bold letters, take advantage of family gatherings, because those are, whether you've got 20 more or 2 more, you just never know. None of us really know. So it's important to kind of seize all the opportunities. And every family has that documentary, the one who whips out the camera at everything, or so just take advantage of that person and give them the assignment. So I just want to go just a little bit into the value of this kind of a process, dignity therapy being the term used for a process that's being used with terminally ill patients. And they're just guided through a conversation about their lives, their feelings, their hopes and dreams. The same thing, recordings are transcribed into a book and given to the patients and families. And so the study, and there's a link to the study there, the study involving 441 patients, average age of 65. So not a real elderly population, I wouldn't say. They had higher scores on every measure of self-reported well-being compared to those who did not have this service as part of their care. And I think that's really important. So, in hospice care is so much about providing a well-rounded, holistic support and, comfort. And so it's not just about making somebody more physically comfortable, it's helping someone feel more emotionally and spiritually comfortable with where they're at. And this seems to be a vehicle for helping with that. And these are some of the measures of well-being. So you can see that, and this is people who are satisfied with their care, not necessarily, that project was satisfying. They're saying, people who had this included as part of their care just felt more satisfied with the care that they received, found the process to be very helpful, increased their sense of dignity, purpose, and meaning. Those are really high on our list of goals and values for Iowa City Hospice. Increase the will to live, maybe not, but that's not the important aspect. As a matter of fact, maybe it might have increased their comfort with the fact that they're going to die, and believed that it had or would help their family. Most people found that to be true. I find that to be, you can't make a pill that can do that. That's really compelling evidence for an intervention. And then here's some of the quotes from the people, the actual characters of the legacy narratives. It helps bring my memories, thoughts, and feelings into perspective instead of all jumbled emotions running through my head. I'm able to leave some sort of insight for myself and my husband and children and all my family and friends. Dignity therapy was a lovely experience. Getting down on paper what I thought was a dull, boring life really opened my eyes to how much I have done. And I find this to be very true when we're introducing, a legacy project to a patient who says, oh, boring old me, I didn't do anything important. I only raised 10 kids on a farm and, you just, the more people delve into their own stories, you understand that they've accomplished amazing things. This experience has helped me delve within myself and see more meaning in my life. I really look forward to sharing it with my family. So, again, at a time when, whether that's terminal or serious illness or illness, not so serious, creating an event where the family you're sharing with one another. That's really important. Maybe, I've found, and I certainly saw it with Rosalie and other people who are in hospice care, that sometimes when you're sick, the usual people, the usual suspects, aren't showing up as much anymore. Maybe friends aren't so comfortable, they don't know how they can help, they don't know what to say. Family, children, spouses, we're not, as a culture, we're not totally comfortable with serious illness and the idea of life coming to an end. And so this is just a positive thing where you can gather together and create a new memory around creating the legacy document. So the value to the family, this is again continuing with the research. So there's a sense of heritage, the sense of interconnectedness, generativity. So you continue to guide the next generation with your own experience and wisdom, and then you're creating an archive of family history that builds family unity. One thing I want to share about this is recently we had, and this wasn't even part of a legacy, a quote-unquote formal legacy project, but we have another program that provides special support to patients who are veterans. And one of the things that we do in that program is we provide a certificate of appreciation for military service to all of our patients who are veterans. And we try, whenever possible, to make that as dignified a ceremony as possible. And ideally using veterans or military personnel themselves, because that's has a real big impact. And so we had a young man in uniform go to present the certificate to a veteran patient, and his grandchildren were around. And they were just enthralled by this ceremony. It had a big impact. Now, a couple of days later, their grandpa passed away. But we heard that ceremony, which I think of as kind of a legacy event, inspired in them a desire to continue researching their father or their grandfather's military history, the war that he served in, the era, the branch of service. And so, I just think that's wonderful, because they were continuing to not only learn from him, but learn about him and have a relationship with him, all around a very simple 5-minute interaction. So again, here's some of the statistics about how helpful it was to the families, and you can see that it was extremely helpful, especially in wanting their loved one to have a greater sense of dignity and a sense of purpose. And I think this is a good one. 65% said that this family members, that this legacy project was as important an aspect of care as anything else that was done on their behalf. And there's a lot that's done on their behalf. There's, a whole team of people that are providing, nursing care and home health aides and spiritual care, emotional support, connecting resources to the family, but to think that this very simple thing was as important for more than half of the people is a big deal. And you can see reading the document gave my mom a sense of accomplishment, I believe. It gave her a tangible way of looking back at a life well lived. And to me, there's no better reason to do a legacy project than that right there. Continuing benefits for the family in terms of bereavement and afterwards. And this is important, in Iowa City Hospice, because we provide 13 months of bereavement follow-up after a patient dies. So even if we only have a patient for a short time, we're interacting with that family for a full year plus afterwards. And so if we've had the time to create a legacy document, that's just a real nice continuity into the bereavement process. 77% said that the document would continue to comfort the family. That's quite a big impact. I would say that it was more helpful than any mourning aspect. It helped me move past it. Family and friends are certainly a support, but through the document, my mom was able to provide support. That wisdom. And I've got, maybe now would be a good time to share an example of something that we did with a young patient, and I have permission from all of these people to share. This was a woman who was a young mom, 4 children under the age of 13, who had cancer, and she passed away. And she knew everything that she wanted to say. We didn't have to do any prompting or triggering with those lists of questions for the legacy document. She simply did not have the energy to write it down. And she didn't have anyone in her life that wasn't, maybe too emotionally involved to do it. And so the volunteer came and helped her just write down. She recorded the transcriptions and then would write down the letters, and then would take them back to the patient, and she would review and edit. So each of the children got an individual letter to them personally, and then Mom wanted to create one kind of overall letter to be given to them when they're older, and that's the copy that I have that I'll share with you. So again, just thinking of these young children who will appreciate having continued support from their mom. My advice, dear young adult children, school is important. You are fortunate that there is a school fund for all of you, so more education is available for each of you. I would love to see you all go to college. Education is something that will always be with you. Enjoy your graduations, but be safe. Do something that will make you happy. Since you have to do it almost every day, find something you enjoy. It makes for a long life if you hate your job. It can make you hate life. I want you to find someone that will fill your life with joy. If you are in a bad relationship, get out of it! ! You are never stuck. Someone will help, church if not family. Someone is available. Take advantage of that. Tell someone if you need assistance. Ask for help. Bad things can happen to the best of people, and when bad things do happen, you need to reach out to family and church. Stay away from drugs. They can ruin your life. My advice regarding dating, this is to the girls, don't be promiscuous. Save yourself for someone you think you really love. It's really worth it in the end. My advice regarding dating to the boys, don't do it because everyone else is doing it. It doesn't mean you are a man. You will know when it is the right person or wrong person. Your instincts will tell you. Trust your instincts. I think you should all take time to have a honeymoon. Do it now, or it may not happen. I love flowers, real flowers. We had peonies from my grandmother's yard at my wedding. Flowers up on the altar at your weddings in remembrance of me would be lovely. I thank you. I mean, that's really powerful. And that didn't take much time or effort. And of course, that's an extraordinary person who's able to put those thoughts in such a succinct way. But that will be a treasure for those children. And a huge comfort to their mother, I might add, knowing that that was left behind. So just a brief little touch on working with cognitively limited patients. So that may mean dementia patients, Alzheimer's patients, or even, at certain end stages of disease, there can be a little bit of confusion. And there's a couple of links here. Project Storykeeper has been doing some interviews that shows that life review process in the early ages of Alzheimer's may help kind of mitigate the progression. So if you engage someone in life review and frequently discuss those memories, that will help them stay connected to the present moment longer. We did that quite a bit with Rosalie. She had done a lot of writing with the writers group that she was a part of here in Iowa City, and had her stories bound. And when she got too tired and too, just to an end stage of her life to even talk about it, we would read her stories back to her. And sometimes we wouldn't get much but a grunt or a finger pointing up to the heavens or something. We could tell that was really important to her, because we'd say, should we stop now? No, read another one. So she really enjoyed hearing those stories back. There's a time slips model, which is a wonderful kind of model for storytelling that doesn't necessarily have to do with reality. It's about creating an opportunity to tell a story with the patient, the family member, just sharing if you showed them a picture of a garden and what might come up for them. It may not have any relevance or any historical fact to it, but it's a way to just engage their imagination and a way to reflect who they are now. And those can be captured and bound in a story or some kind of document format, the same way anything else, any other legacy document would. And some of that training is available here in Iowa City. So now I'll just go quickly through, sort of the menu here, and we've already talked a little bit about, we've talked about all of these things. So we offer kind of an oral history interview, whether that's transcribed or recorded, photographs, or the digital scrapbook. We have tried video and have found that that's a heck of a lot of work, and oftentimes people aren't real comfortable being videotaped, especially at a time when they may not be feeling their best or feel that they look the way they want to be represented. So voice recording seems to be the best way to sort of capture the essence of the person. You still have, because we give the patient and family a copy of the recording, and then transcribe if they want the written document. And then, I don't need to go in real, this is where it gets kind of technical and it may feel like I'm training volunteers, but these are just some things to think about if you want to do work on a project like this with a family member. And again, I think it's okay and preferred to make it kind of an intentional, structured, meeting. So when you sit down for that first meeting, you don't necessarily need to record it, but you can talk a little bit about, what do you want to say and who do you want to say it to? Maybe there's just one part of your life that you want to address, or maybe you just want to write a letter like our young mother. And then, maybe engaging a little bit in the conversation about, you want your grandson to know about this, tell me why, that's interesting to me. And then wanting them to know if it's okay to record or just to take notes. And then, I think it's really important to share with the person, and again, you and I might not be doing it, but it might be grandson recording, sharing how it works, sharing the device. People get a kick out of, how that works. And they'll want to know what's happening and why it's beeping or why it's doing what it's doing. Some people have a very specific message, others don't quite know where to begin. And so, a chronology is always a great place to begin if you're kind of stuck. And we've got that in that everybody has a story to tell. The thing that's important about establishing some parameters in the beginning is you can just, somebody can just go off in all sorts of different directions. And this may be just fine for a family member who has all the time in the world, but in terms of transcribing a lot of information, it takes quite a bit of time, and sometimes we don't have the volunteer power to help with that. And then the other thing is if you've described or if you've established some parameters and the storyteller starts to go off on tangents, you can gently remind them that, but remember, we're telling this for Joey, and I thought you said it was important to, talk about your time in the railroad. So then in the interviews as they go further, and I think this is really important too, again, even just for family members, going back and forth. We have volunteers who have worked with patients who are, compromised with their breathing, will visit 3 times a week for 10 to 15 minute times, so it doesn't have to be a big long interview. It's just, you're just making sure that you're getting back to it and providing some continuity. Last time I was here, we finished up by talking about, or we were going to talk about, And then if you've got some transcriptions that you've done, you can read it to, or let the family member read it and make edits. This is their time where they can get the story down just the way they want to. And that's a very kind of subliminal way of encouraging that life review process as they look back over these memories. This is a quote from one of our volunteers. I worried that I wasn't gathering enough content to make this good enough. Tell future volunteers and future family members not to worry. I now believe that the writing doesn't have to be long, or the stories numerous, or the writing stellar to evoke shared lovely memories and to pass a precious message along to family members. That is really true. We have found that it doesn't have to be a big, complicated endeavor. So I just want to share a little story here, because one of the caveats of this is you can start this project with the best of intentions. Something will inevitably go in a different direction, and that's not to say it's the wrong direction, but there is a certain open-mindedness required in order to let the story, the document, take the direction it needs to take. This is a woman. Her husband was our patient, actually, and this was our very first legacy endeavor, and we were going to videotape him telling about his war experience, because he was very proud of his military history, and he had a lot of artifacts like his uniform and medals and things from the war. Every time we went, he was not feeling up to it, and so at one point we had a videographer volunteer and then a note taker volunteer, or a interviewer. They would start to have more and more conversations with wife Wanda, and so they just decided to turn the camera on and have her tell a little bit of the story. And I love this quote about their first date, when he started to put his arm around the back of her chair, and she thought, "Wait a minute, Buster." The irony of the story is that Wanda actually ended up passing away before her husband did. She passed away about a week later from a very sudden stroke. And so for that family, it wasn't, and then he soon after, so they actually had a shared funeral. It was just an interesting end result to our first, go at this. And so what we've decided is that you can make the best of plans, but you also have to have the flexibility to just go with the direction that the circumstances compel you to go. The family was very glad to have this material. Same with the photo. So, scheduling a photo session. And nowadays, everything's digital, so you can take many, many photos. And then the sort of life review part, or at least the empowerment of choice part, is taking that proof, or taking the laptop back and allowing the patient to pick the photos that they would like to have printed and framed in some way. This is just considerations for some of our volunteer photographers that may be useful for you all, especially the top part, working in different contexts and in various lighting situations. If you have someone who's not feeling well, they're not going to feel like maybe going outside where the light is better. So you just have to meet people where they are and what they're feeling that day. So here's, and I'll show you, this is just a couple of legacy photos from a family member, Iowa City Hospice patient and caregiver spouse, and their beloved cat, Prince. So, that's a photo that tells the story of their relationship. And what we do, and we do this whether it's an interview or a photo, is very simply, to kind of create that occasion where you're presenting the finished product. We put the photo in a, just a very inexpensive folder, and then for us, we have the volunteer write a thank you note for having the privilege of sharing this time with these people. And I would encourage family members to do that as well, because I think that's part of the, instilling this, or underscoring this sense of your life and your stories and your experience means something to me, and it's a privilege to know you. And again, we were talking earlier about sometimes people don't feel good being photographed. You can do some creative cropping, and just, there's all sorts of different things. So again, as I say to my volunteers, I'll say to you, I'm giving you kind of a very some fundamental ideas about where to start, but don't be afraid to let your imagination and your creativity take you. And again, so finally with the digital scrapbook, just a gathering of things that, whether that's photos or letters, those can be scanned into a document, they can be scanned onto a CD and create kind of a slideshow. Those things are very simple to do, and there's lots of, you can take them to a Kinko's or Copyworks or something, and they'll help you do that. We did this before we had, with many of our programs at Iowa City Hospice, we're kind of doing them informally long before we create a formal program. And we did a scrapbook with one of our patients who had ALS. And so with ALS, your body, the nerves no longer send messages, so you can't really move, but you're very cognitively intact. And I can't tell you how many revisions we did on that scrapbook, but they were important because that patient wanted it to have it just so. And she was in charge, and we were just her fingers and her legs, and were able to get what she wanted to have done. And that's probably the one thing I'll say in terms of a family member that might be different or might need a little more emphasizing than with a volunteer, is it's really important to let the main character be in charge of this process, even down to whether what they're saying is historically accurate in your opinion or not. Because of course volunteers don't know what's accurate or not, so they're much more able to just be open and accepting of where the patient is. But when you get family members involved, and sometimes when we've had them there at the legacy interview, you can hear somebody going, "That's not how it went at all," But it's important to kind of set aside, your own need we're just reflecting history as it's being perceived by this person in this moment. So that's really important, and I address that a little bit in the workbook. So we all know everybody has a story to tell. Everybody in this room has a story to tell. It's an opportunity for our patients, for our family members, for our loved ones to reflect on our achievements and our disappointments, and to promote that intergenerational connection so we can learn from our elders. It combats a sense of isolation and a sense of loss, and that's all of that together is combined in that idea of generativity. It's our young mother's letter she's continuing to generate a legacy and a presence and a teaching through this document for her children. So, and again, this is for volunteers, but I say for you, are you ready? You sort of have to, one of the things that I talk about in the little workbook, the Everybody Has a Story to Tell workbook, is there's, creating the context. And first of all, the first thing we do is check our inner space. Are we open? Are we okay with what might come up? What if things get emotional? Is that okay? Am I ready for that? Can I be open to that? Can I accept some regrets or some bitterness without taking it personally, or any of those things? And that's not, everybody's situation is unique and personal, but there is a kind of gut check about the possibilities of certain feelings and emotions being stirred up, and how comfortable we can be with the full expression of those. That's a big part of my teaching with the Iowa City Hospice volunteers, because that's one of the greatest gifts that volunteers provide to our patients, is this kind of, I call it neutral compassion. They're not invested in that patient being one way or the other, but that's because they don't have the history with them. At that point in time, that can be kind of a relief. But as family members, if we can do that for our loved ones, that same kind of, maybe not neutral, but that open compassion and just interest and curiosity about, this process, that's a huge gift that we can give to them. It's a very healing kind of exchange of energy. So there's lots of resources around for this kind of, as a matter of fact, you could spend so much time looking at resources and never really get started. So I would say just dive in and do it, and then maybe look for resources to see how it goes. Because, I think the volunteer kind of spoke to the fact that, there's this sense of wanting to get it down just so and have it be perfect and, ask all the right questions and get enough information. It's really the process that is the most meaningful. The end result, the end concrete document is wonderful for handing down, but the process is really the part that matters. So I would encourage you to just kind of dive in. The Iowa City Senior Center is working on creating kind of a core of interviewers to provide this service for community members. And Iowa City Hospice has been sitting at that table sharing what we have learned in our legacy project. So that may be something as we go forward. I know they're still kind of in the planning stages, but that would be one avenue. The other thing that they have is, if you wanted to do an interview there, or, they have recording equipment, and they have all sorts of equipment and things, photography and all sorts of things. Local craft stores, copy centers, and photo outlets can help with, making the copies and scanning photos or printing photos. Lots of personal computer apps and services now. You can make Shutterfly books, just import all of the information and even the text with the pictures, and make a very durable document book, like a real live paperback or hardcover book to be handed down. The things that, the sources that I used and that we continue to, mine in helping us develop our program are all there online, if you have a computer. They have computers at the Senior Center.
They do at the library too.
Oh, that's right. Yes, you're absolutely right. So, let's see. Any questions or thoughts? And again, Maggie has the microphone. Any responses? Any feelings?
We tried very hard to get my aunt to tape record things. Mm-hmm. She was the family historian pretty much, and she refused, and it was far enough back that we didn't have the technology that we have now. And my brother and I do not always remember things the same, like you said. And so, we've lost a lot of our history already that would have been great to have.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what I mean by that endangered. Can I ask you a question though? Why did she refuse? Or do you remember why?
Yeah, she just was not comfortable with people
being the
recording.
center of attention. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But she my grandfather was an undertaker, and she worked with him many, many, many years and had lots of stories, along with a lot of family stories, about my grandfather and great-grandfather were both mail carriers, and, some of the things they did was they delivered mail with horses and, things that, but like I say, my brother and I don't remember the same things, so we're not sure who's right. But
that living history, that's what I think of when I think of this wisdom and this experience. And we have with a certain era and generation, that sort of humility is common, and people don't want to be the center of attention. They don't think they have anything useful to offer or say. In those situations, we have just encouraged people to think about their children, grandchildren, that if you can take it out of, it's not for you, it's not for us, it's for our future generations. Sometimes that can help in those kinds of situations. Perfect example, though.
I can think of my own parents. We have boxes of pictures that my dad kept saying, I'm going to have to go through and label these. And of course, now they're not labeled and no one knows, But those pictures could have led to many stories, not him just labeling those when he's sitting around at night, but labeling with people around and telling the story of the picture.
And the thing that I'm a big one for, just keep it simple. I mean, if you just took a 1-inch stack of photo, because I think that's the other piece, is people look at this big book and they have just loads and gobs of keepsakes, and it's like if you just grabbed this one little stack and just said, let's just go through this part and just see where that leads. That's valuable, because then in situations like you're talking about, you would at least have something. The other thing, going back to your question, maybe taking notes, maybe she'd be less, maybe somebody who doesn't want to be interviewed or recorded would be more apt to just tell the stories and have you take notes, which is a little more work, but yeah. Yeah, it's endangered. I mean, that's why I use the word, it's like an endangered species. Once they're gone, they're gone.
Along that line, when we were going through my grandfather's stuff and my aunt's stuff, we found this picture of someone in a Civil War uniform, but nobody knows who it was. So, it was very special, but it would have been a whole lot more special if we knew who it was. So.
And nowadays, the other thing you can do, with Ancestry.com and stuff, is if you have a little kernel of information about something, depending on how much effort you want to put into it, you can really build the story from there. One of the things that we did along those lines, this was our second video legacy project, and this was about a woman who, again, another immigrant from Germany. And, we would do this differently because it was, we took a lot of footage of just our interviewing, and then it was a very lengthy process of editing it down. But the editor went back, and there were some unique aspects to her town that she grew up in Germany, and so interspersed some old pictures of things that he was able to find online in the video. And so the family just really appreciated having a little bit. I mean, this is almost like a documentary, the way it brings a story alive. And that's, if you just get a little crumb, you can do so much nowadays.
Sarah, for the people watching on Channel 4, can they contact you for to get this? Everyone has a story to tell, and kind of what would this do for them?
Well, that's great, because we haven't really gone through that. So I just created this is the part of the training document that I give to Iowa City Hospice volunteers, and it talks about creating that inner space, listening with genuine empathy, interest, being comfortable with silence. Are you, just making sure that you're comfortable with taking the time. That's another thing. We would sit around and Rosie would tell stories, and sometimes, her family would be like, well, come on, Mom, get to the point. Sometimes just telling the story and letting their mind travel back to those days is the point. So we have to kind of have a certain amount of patience. But then outer space in terms of, is the recording equipment available? Is it working? Can we turn the TV off while we're doing this, to make sure that we're getting a clear recording? And then just, being able to read the cues, the nonverbal cues of the patient. Maybe they're tired or not having a good day, or after 10 minutes have had enough. So, and then it goes into just beginning the recording. And then a lot of these are just trigger questions. So questions having to do with childhood, young adulthood, their sense of identity. Like there's a question, how are you like your mother or your father? Do you have a favorite book, a saying or prayer? What is it and why? Those are the kinds of things that help us get a sense of the person's identity and help them kind of come up with those same thoughts. There's some questions of, dealing with aging. So if the patient or if the family member is willing to shed some light on their aging process, that we can all learn from. So, how old are you? How old do you feel? What's the hardest thing about your life right now? What's the best thing? How should a person prepare for old age? I personally want to know these questions, and I'm going to be asking some of you afterwards. I've got a few tips for communicating with dementia patients or cognitively limited patients. Using a calm, gentle approach. Tone and facial expressions are very important. Simple language, and making sure, the other thing we're talking about is maybe hearing impaired or vision impaired. So it's really important that you're at eye level with the person, and that they have an opportunity to, read your lips and hear you clearly. Another thing that you can do with dementia patients is using just magazines or pictures. We've got a lot of farmers in this community, and if you bring in a farm equipment magazine or something, that could get a whole line of thought going. Music is also another great way to connect with cognitively impaired patients. So, maybe just a CD of their favorite music would be that legacy project. We had one of our volunteers is a Catholic nun, and she was telling me, I'm collecting these stories, these sort of incidental legacy creations that people do. And one thing that she did was with a nun friend, but family wanted it was meaningful for the family, was recording the nun saying the rosary. And then that could be played by the family and the descendants. So that started us on this whole thought of maybe, the patient or the family member reading their favorite scripture quote, or saying their favorite prayer, or singing their favorite song, just something that simple. There's also some questions here, and again, remembering this is for our hospice volunteers. But the questions about terminal illness, and these are directly from that dignity therapy interview. So they're really not necessarily about terminal illness, because we can all answer questions like, what are your hopes and dreams for your loved ones? Or what have you learned about life that you would want to pass along to others? I could answer that question, and let's see what else here. Are there words or perhaps even instructions you would like to offer your family to help prepare them for the future? That maybe gets a little bit. What are the most important roles you have played in life? Family roles, vocational roles, community service roles. Why are they so important to you? What did you accomplish from those? And then we do have a list of questions if you want to engage someone in their military history. People don't tend to want to talk about their time in the service. And so one of our volunteers has come up with a very gentle, non-threatening ways to talk about just the different, what did you have at the mess hall, and did you leave a girl behind? Did you ever get a Dear John letter? Some of those things. And then again, the resources, some of those are a repeat of this, but then different resources online. So yes, anybody who wasn't able to make it today can certainly call me at Iowa City Hospice, and I'd be glad to share what we're doing with our legacy volunteers.